Good morning. This is Pastor Guy Walker again from Barn Church in Hereford, Texas, and we're glad to have you guys with us this morning. We're very excited to announce that this coming Thursday night at Pentecost is next Thursday, May 28th at sundown, we'll be having our Pentecost celebration we have every year with our church family, and we'll be officially opening back up, and we have a meal furnished, and if you intend to come, please go to our Facebook page and click going on there, so we'd be sure that we have enough food for you. If you do select your going at all, please know that we're going to buy the food to cover that, so try to come. Sometimes things come up and you can't, but we're excited about getting started again and looking forward to seeing everybody. And then after that, on the next Sunday, we'll be meeting every Sunday morning. Our Facebook ministry will continue. Our YouTube channel, of course, will continue. We'll be putting messages on every week. And so we're excited to try to get back to the new abnormal, as they say. It's going to be a little different, but it will be tremendous to see everybody. This is a tremendous day. This is a special weekend. Tomorrow, of course, is Memorial Day. And the Lord has given me a word about the heart of a soldier that I want to share with you this morning. And I'm in 1 Samuel 17, starting in verse 40 through 47. This is the story of David and Goliath. David is a young man. He's been anointed to be king, but he's still working in the sheepfolds, taking care of his father's sheep. And his father sends him to the battle line where the Philistines and the Israelites are squaring off to do battle. And he sends him to bring some things to his brothers that are serving there in the army. And so he goes to the battle line to take provision to them. And he sees this giant who comes out and chastises the army of Israel. And he's over 9 foot tall, and he's a huge man. And he challenges them to send someone out to fight with him, and whoever wins will be master over the other, nation-wise. And the Israelites are fearful. They're very fearful. And so we pick it up. David has decided that he would collect the reward and he would do it himself. And we pick it up here in verse 40, where it says, "Then he took his staff in his hand and he chose for himself 5 smooth stones from the brook and put them in a shepherd's bag in a pouch which he had, and his sling was in his hand. And he drew near to the Philistine. So the Philistine came and began drawing near to David, and the man who bore the shield went before him. And when the Philistine looked about and saw David, he disdained him, for he was only a youth, ruddy and good-looking. For the Philistine said to David, 'Am I a dog that you come with me with sticks?' And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. And the Philistine said to David, 'Come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field.' And then David said to the Philistine, 'You come to me with sword and with spear and with javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you and take your head from you. And this day I will give the carcasses of the camp of the Philistines to the birds of the air and to the wild beasts of the earth, and all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. Then all this assembly shall know that the Lord does not save with sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands.'" This is an amazing story, and it's so full of appropriate connotation for the time we live in. But tomorrow we pay tribute to those who have gone into battle and have ultimately paid the ultimate price for our freedom. John 15:13 says, Jesus said, "Greater love has no one than this, that he lay down one's life for his friends." The ultimate motivation of a great soldier is not a thirst for valor. The great motivation, or the best motivation for a great soldier, is always love. In Scotland, I have some ancestors that are from that part of the world, and I've studied the history, and it's pretty interesting. The ancient Scots were a tribal culture, and They emerged from the Celtic people of the region, and they were known as fierce warriors. And Hadrian, the Roman emperor, came to the island of Britain and tried to subdue it and subdue the Scots. And the Roman infantry was never able to stand up to the Scots. When they would go into Scotland to attack, they were always put on the run. So finally, Hadrian just gave up, and he just built a wall. He built a rock wall that separated England from what's now England from Scotland, and just turned them over and said, I'm not going in there anymore, but this way I'm just separating them from the rest of the Isle of Britain. And this is one of the reasons the Scottish culture developed completely differently than the English culture. It's kind of interesting. They were a clannish tribal culture right up to the very end. And they didn't promote people. They were not a monarchy like England. England had a king and a queen, and they had a monarchy system of governance. But in Scotland, the clan leader, who was the fiercest warrior, was the one who led the clan. And that's just the way it was. They didn't have any voting. You just had to win it through your fierceness on battle. And but the Scottish warriors did something that fascinates me and made them such fierce soldiers on the battlefield. When the Roman army would start to march into the territory of Scotland, they took their families, their children and their wives and their children, and placed them behind them. And the only thing that stood between the marching, advancing Roman army and their loved ones was them. And their theory is that made you fight even harder and to the death, and it kept anybody from running. Where would you run to? You had to lay it all on the line for your family. And that was what made Scottish warriors such fierce warriors, is that when they looked back, they saw their wives and their children, and that's what they were fighting for. So there's no doubt that love is the greatest motivation for a warrior, and we celebrate a lot of warriors today that have fought for and with love of fellow soldiers, love of family, love of country, and love of God. Military scholars unanimously tell you, in their opinion, that mercenary armies are the easiest to overthrow because their motivation is wrong. It's for money. And when the fighting gets intense, they won't stay. And so I thought this was kind of interesting. And I think that brings us to the whole subject of really what is love, you know? Love is not desire, and that's what the world's definition of love is. It's desire. And the extreme of desire is called lust. In 1 John 2:16 and 17, it says, for all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life, is not of the Father, but is of the world. And the world is passing away in the lust of it, but he who does the will of God abides forever. Lust is the dominant emotion in the world. It's the extreme of desire. And the world tells you that desire is love. So when I say that I love chocolate cake, trust me, I don't have the cake's best interest at heart. Jesus said that there's no greater standard of love than you give your life for your friends. This is the Greek word here is agape love. It's unconditional love, and it's what Jesus was referring to, and it's the word that he always used for love. It's a love of action. It's a love of sacrifice. It's a selfless love. And he was the gold standard of that. He went to the cross for you and me when we were still sinners. Greater love has no one than this, than they lay down their life for a friend. I think Arlington Cemetery is full of examples of agape love, a love that would die for the benefit of someone else. That's what agape love is. In the Greek language, according to C.S. Lewis, there are 4 loves. There's agape, which is selfless love. It's the love of God and for God. There's storge, which is the love of a parent for a child. There's phileo, which is brotherly love, or the love between friends. And there's eros, the erotic or romantic love between a man and a woman. I heard the great Ravi Zacharias, who passed away this last week, great man of God, great teacher of the Word. I heard him say that of these four loves, the other three, the last three, hang on the linchpin of the first one. If you don't have agape love, if you don't have a love for God, if you haven't accepted His unconditional love, you will have a hard time with storge or phileo or eros. Those will be loves that will not be satisfying in the end, and you'll not be good at them, and you'll not be able to sustain them. That everything begins with agape love. And most great generals would tell you that for the soldier to die for the benefit of others, he has to first be filled with agape love. So we celebrate today those that are fallen. Both soldiers. We have 290,000 U.S. men and women that have died in military conflicts since we've become a nation. 3 times as many that have died during the current pandemic. And the other kind of soldier, which is our healthcare workers. There have been literally dozens of healthcare workers that have given their life to fight this disease. They're soldiers too. They're examples of agape action. They're examples of agape love. Arlington National Cemetery is an incredible place, and when you go there, you can feel the presence of the Lord hovering over that place, because all of those perfectly aligned grave markers are examples of agape love, someone who's willing to die for the benefit of others. Jesus being the gold standard of that. They fought a just cause for a righteous nation. Now hear me now. It's up to us to make sure they didn't die in vain. It's up to us to make sure that America continues to be a righteous nation, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all, a place of freedom, a place of democracy, a place of agape love. David was the greatest soldier. If you want to study soldiering, you have to study David. He was the greatest soldier of all time. And the word says that he goes to the battle line as a young boy for the first time, to go to the battle line to take provision to his older brothers. And here's the Israelite army and the Philistine army encamped on 2 opposing mountains with a valley in between. And every day this Philistine giant comes out and challenges them. And the winner would be the master of the other, and the other nation would serve and be a slave to the winner. And David sees this guy coming out and intimidating this army, and it says in verse 26, it says, "Then David spoke to the men who stood by him, and he said, 'What shall be done for the man who kills this Philistine and takes away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?'" His first observation about this guy was not how big he was. It was that he was not in covenant with God, and that he was in defiance of God. I wish I could compile medical records based on those that were in strong covenant with God, following after him fully, and those that were not. Those that were Philistines for all practical purposes. And compare the outcomes. People who are in strong covenant and following after Jesus have different outcomes in their circumstances. And I know God didn't promise health and wealth and all of that. You hear the preachers talk about that all the time. He didn't promise us an easy life. He did promise us that there are certain things that when we stand on them that he would do. Greater things than these shall you do. Lay hands on the sick and see them recover. This is one of many things that are within the terms of the covenant. And David's motivation on the battlefield was always agape. One of his brothers, when he asked what would be done for you if you took this guy out, his brother said, "Oh, you're just up here just to show off." And David said, "I'm not either. That's not my motivation. My motivation is for the benefit of God and his reputation." David's motivation was always to bring glory to God. He would always ask God before he engaged in an enemy. He never went on a battlefield before he didn't ask God, "What do you want me to do? Should I go?" And God happens to be a pretty good general because he's had to fight these battles a lot. In Exodus 15:3, the word says, "The Lord is a warrior and the Lord is his name." David says later on in Psalms 18:32 through 34, "It is God who arms me with strength and makes my way perfect. He teaches my hands to make war so that my arms can bend the bow of bronze." David ran to the battle line. It says that he ran to the battle line. In 1 Samuel 17:46, he said, "This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you and take your head from you." He's telling the giant. "And this day I will give the carcasses of the camp of the Philistines to the birds of the air and the wild beasts of the earth, all that the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. Not because I'm famous, not to make me famous or a big shot, but so that people will know that God is still on the throne." Verse 47, "Then all this assembly shall know that the Lord does not save with sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands." You know, if you're in a fight, and you probably are of some kind, in the devastation of this pandemic, remember this: the battle's the Lord's. And he will give your adversary into your hands so that people will know that Jesus Christ is Lord. As long as you make it about him and not about you. The way David did. David never made it about him. He always made it about the Lord. But there's some things about David's attitude here that we've got to understand. Number one, David perceived an opportunity when everyone else was looking at disaster. Adversity breeds opportunity. That's one of my favorite sayings. Adversity breeds opportunity. And David asked him, he says, "Well, what do you get if you take this guy out? You get to marry the girl and you don't pay any tax and you get a lot of money." They're all scared. It says when the giant would come out, that Israel would retreat in fear and run back and hide in the rocks and the brush. And David is going, "This is my lucky day. What an opportunity." His reaction to the situation is 100% opposite of what theirs is. They tell him, he said, the man who kills him is going to get to marry the daughter and no taxes for his family and lots of wealth. David doesn't see disaster. All he sees is opportunity. David has this one military trait, I think, that we need to talk about, that we need to study. He's able to compartmentalize fear. He doesn't respond in fear. He responds in faith. But more than that, he continues to think clearly and brilliantly about the enemy and his tactics. Instead of when everybody else is getting fearful and they're wanting to run, you cannot think when you're fearful. You cannot think when you're anxious. What David does is he uses it. He sees that he probes the enemy for a weakness. He watches what the enemy does. He compartmentalizes his fear. Maybe he should be fearful. Maybe he has 1,000 reasons to be fearful. But they teach this technique to Navy SEALs. They say you're going to die out on the battlefield when you get ambushed by the enemy, you become fearful. You're going to die because you'll freeze and you can't think. And they teach them how to psychologically compartmentalize their fear. Not to deny it, just put it somewhere else for right now. Because what they got to do right now is they've got to think. What they got to do right now is they got to look for an opportunity. They've got to find a weakness. They've got to default to their military training. This is a word the Lord gave me for a couple that was in our sanctuary this week. They've got to default to their military training. When you go through military training, the idea is that when you get in that situation, instead of being paralyzed by your emotions, that the training would just take over and you would start doing what you need to do to survive. When you're on the edge of panic, you fall into this military routine of training. And God told his general Joshua in 1 Joshua chapter 8 to default to your military training. Here's what he said. He said, the book of law shall not depart from your mouth, the Torah, Old Testament, shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it night and day, that you may observe to do according to all that is written in it. Then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will have good success. Here's your military training. You think the word, you speak the word, you do the word. When you've been in the word to where it's part of your speech pattern, when it's part of the way you think, your thinking process, when it becomes, if it becomes a thought that turns into a speech, a spoken word, it will then become an action. You begin to think the word, do the word, and speak the word. When you're in the word in your times of terror and fear, then it will take over. It will begin to take over and take over your thought process. You can't run around in fear and worry and perceive opportunity. You just can't do that. Nobody can. So you have to think the word, say the word, do the word, and pretty soon you'll notice opportunity starts opening up for you. You begin to see it. It's there all along. You begin to see it, and you begin to go, wow, wait a minute. I think I have an opportunity here to do something. So what exactly do your giants look like? Because you got some. Everybody's got some giants. It says in Numbers chapter 13:32, whenever they sent the spies in to spy out Canaan, and they came back and spread a bad report, they said, there we saw the giants. They said, oh, it's a great land. It has lots of opportunity. But the problem is the giants. There we saw the giants. The descendants of Anak came from the giants. And we were like grasshoppers in our own sight, so we were in their sight. Now, this is a powerful psychological thing they seem to understand. Because they saw themselves as totally inadequate, then those around them, their enemies, says, he doesn't think he can do it. He doesn't have what it takes. And they saw right through them. We were grasshoppers in our own sight, so therefore we were grasshoppers in their sight. And this is very, very true. They didn't see themselves as warriors. They saw themselves as inadequate. And when they saw themselves as inadequate, and the problem there was as they were inadequate, they were looking at themselves and not at the covenant relationship with God. He's the one that's not inadequate. He's the one that can do it. He's the one that has the power to overcome anything. He's the one that'll bring you through. He's the one you got to trust, not you. You got to trust him. Because they perceived themselves as no match for the giants, therefore they became no match for them. If they had said, we're totally inadequate and we're just grasshoppers compared to them, but you know what, we got a mighty God that just split the Red Sea and drowned an Egyptian army, all of them. They're floating around out there right now. Taking care of these giants is not a problem for him. That's not the reaction that was what God expected them to say. David's reaction when he saw his giant, you know what his reaction was when he saw that giant and he saw how big that guy's head was? He says, that guy's head's too big to miss. It's too big to miss. Everybody else was running around and David would go, man, what a target. It all stems from your relationship with the Lord. David told Saul when he said, boy, you think you can do this? He said, I've taken out bears and lions, protecting my sheep. The Lord's put them, given in my... This boy had learned some things. This is another lesson about David. You work on your skills every day. Let me tell you, David worked on his skills, doing what his job that he was doing, taking care of sheep every day. And he had confidence in them. And we need to do the same thing. I think your skills, God is going to use your skills. He's going to anoint them. But you got to practice them to get through in the day of difficult time. And the other thing you got to have is a strategy. The Lord gave David a strategy. Now listen to me. This is what happens now when you observe and don't panic and fear. When you find out the company's laying everybody off and you're one of them, and how am I going to make my house payments? When you don't deteriorate into fear. We have, in our church body, we have several people that are in various industries and various things. We don't have our people are busier now than they've ever been. They're busy. They're in covenant. They're in covenant. God is taking care of them. Some of them have lost their jobs and started doing something that they would practice their skills at doing on the side. Now they're doing that full time. I don't mean to be, I know I sound facetious. I don't mean to be, I know it's not that way everywhere. But I'm here to tell you that there is a God in Israel. His name is Jesus Christ. And those that are called by his name, he will take care of. And he will get you through. Have confidence in that. Ask him for a strategy. David had a strategy. In 1 Samuel 17:40 it says, then he took his staff in his hand. After they made the decision to let the kid try it, they put the armor on him and he couldn't wear it. He said, it doesn't fit. I don't need this. Because it wasn't his strategy. And so they said, well, go on. Do the best you can. And he knelt down in the creek and he chose himself 5 smooth stones. He got him some nice round projectiles. He knew exactly what he needed because he'd had a lot of experience with a slingshot. See, this is the thing that a lot of Christians, they charge to the battle line, they do all this stuff, but they haven't been practicing their skills any. And so they fail and they go, I don't know why God didn't help me. Well, were you practicing your slingshot before how much time did you spend working on your slingshot? How much time did you spend working on your skill, whatever it is that you're doing? He was skilled. He knew what he was doing, David did. And God had given him a strategy. I'm going to show you. He took these stones and he put them in his shepherd's bag in the pouch that was in his hand, and his sling was in his hand, and he drew near to the Philistine. But he carefully chose his position. And he carefully chose his projectiles that he was going to use. Because while everybody was running, this giant had been coming out and threatening the army of Israel for 40 days, twice a day. So there was plenty of time to observe him for any weaknesses. David just saw him do it one time, and right away he noticed something about him, and that is that his armor bearer came out before him. It says in 1 Samuel 17:41, so the Philistines came and they began to draw near to David. This is the giant. The Philistine came and began to draw near to David, and the man who bore his shield went before him. This is a very unusual thing. This is a dishonorable thing. An armor bearer never goes before his champion, ever, anywhere. I don't care if you're going into Payless to get going into Packsack to get a Coke. The armor bearer don't go in first. So David knew there was something peculiar about this, and he got to watching this giant, and he realized his vision wasn't any good. That the armor bearer was actually leading him onto the battlefield. Right away, the Lord began to give him a strategy. Nobody else had noticed it because they were busy hiding in the bushes and being scared, thinking this was over. So David gets an opportunity to marry a good-looking woman, not pay taxes for the rest of his life, get a bunch of money, and become a hero because he's not reacted in fear, and he's seen this adversarial relationship as a tremendous opportunity. And he starts studying and figuring out how he can pull it off. It says he drew near to the Philistine, but he didn't get too close. He measured he knew about how far that guy could see. And think about this. He knew when he realized that his vision was not any good, that he could put this stone in the sling, that he could wrap it up, and that he could sail this thing, and the guy wouldn't duck because he's squinting trying to figure out what he's doing. I'm telling you, in life, if we'll calm down, if we'll pray, if we'll say, Lord, show us the opening, give us a strategy. Lord, give us a strategy. He'll give you one. And it'll be the way out. And nobody who's fearful will be able to see it. So what you need in this season of confrontation of your giants, of unemployment or whatever they are, you need to get the Lord to help you formulate a strategy. You need to compartmentalize your fear. Put it away for a while because it's not doing you any good. Rely on your military training. Speak the word. Think the word, speak the word, do the word, focus on the word. And remember, the giant is not in covenant. You are. You're in covenant. And try confessing this out of 1 Samuel 17, 46 and 47. Just go ahead and just speak right out to your giant, whatever it is. If it's a bank loan, if it's receivables you can't collect, I don't care what it is. Just speak to that giant and say, this day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you and I will take your head off. And this day I will give the carcass of the camp of the Philistines to the birds of the air and the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel, that all the assembly shall know, that all the church shall know. Just put church in there. That all the church shall know that the Lord don't save with sword and spear, but the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into my hands. You face your giants. We celebrate soldiers that have given their life, that have made a choice, that have chose to die to benefit others. And that's the most incredible thing. When you hear taps in Arlington Cemetery, it gives you a chill. But I would like for this generation, a pandemic generation, survivors of the pandemic crisis in the world, to not throw themselves on the altar of, well, I guess it wasn't meant to be, but to fight for it. Fight for your business, fight for your job, fight for your family, fight for whatever it is that the COVID virus has stolen from you. Fight for your health. I don't care what it is. And say to that giant, yeah, I'm going to take your head off. So the world knows that there is a Lord over my house, over my family, over my life. His name is Jesus. And if he gets all the glory, if you do things where he gets the glory, not you, not somebody else, not the government. Don't be giving the glory to the government. If he gets the glory, that giant will bounce when he hits the ground, and you will take his own sword and whack his head off. And this will be another story they would tell for generations of how you came through the tragedy of the COVID-19 pandemic. Your grandkids will be telling the story about how you and Grandma faced up to the giant and just looked it head on and overcame it by the power of God. That's what I want for you. I want to celebrate the heart of those that we memorialize today, because they're wonderful, unbelievable heroes that chose to die for me and you so we could have freedom. Let's don't give that freedom away. They fought for it. They fought for it. Let's don't trade security for freedom. Let's don't give the government any more power than they have. I'm not trying to be a radical here, but I'm telling you, I see some alarming things in this country. And they all are in the name of, good strategies. The problem is they're not God's strategy. You get God to give you a strategy, and you follow that. Let's pray. Father, we just come before you, and we thank you for the war heroes that we celebrate, the men and women that lay in the graves, that gave their life for an idea. They gave their life for an idea that all men are created equal by their Creator, then that they have certain inalienable rights of freedom in the pursuit of happiness. And they came together and they formed a nation that is built on the prospect and the proposition of freedom, religious freedom. And now there are forces at work in our nation that would love to take that away from us. And do not let us never let these men and women to have died in vain because we gave up, because we just quit, because we wouldn't face our giants because we felt inadequate. Let us face the things that we have to overcome and remember them and remember how they died to give us a country and a nation that stood for principles that will always endure. I heard a wealthy billionaire say one time, America works. It just works. It always overcomes. And I believe that. Let's never forget those principles and never forget that you're the Lord. This nation was born in your spirit. It was created by your hands. And you're Lord over it. Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord. We thank you, we praise you, and I pray a special Memorial Day blessing on every family who's lost someone on the battlefield. We just honor them. We honor them. And we want to honor their lost loved ones by fighting the good fight of faith on their behalf. They paid a price so we could do it. We just ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen.
You are here, moving in our midst. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you. I worship you. We'll sing it again. You are here, moving in our midst. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you. I worship you. You are Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are here, touching every heart. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, healing every heart. I worship you. I worship you. You are here. You are here, turning lives around. I worship you. I worship you. You are here. You are here. You're mending every heart. I worship you. I worship you. You are Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are, yeah. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Yeah, that is who you are. Oh, that is who you are. Oh, that is who you are. Oh, that is who you are. We declare that is who you are. Oh, that is who you are. Oh, that is who you are. That is who you are. Oh, that is who you are. Yes, that is who you are. Oh, that is who you are. Come on, sing, even when I can't see. Even when I can't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop. Yeah, you never stop. Yeah, I can. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop. Oh, one more time. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop. Hey, 'cause you are way maker. light in the darkness, my God. Come on, raise your hands and declare that. That you are waymaker,